We heard the story of Muaz, the 3-year-old boy who used to love to go to the masjid and distribute the Qur'ans, the Masahif to the people in the congregation. And he would look forward to picking them all up so he can stack the bookshelves with them. And how he was kissing his father on the cheek moments before the incident as if he was saying goodbye. And his father laid there playing dead while his son was shot to death. The stories of husbands who lost their wives and found them dead in the streets, and wives who lost their husbands and their children. The images of the masjid riddled with bullets, carpets unable to be prayed on, soaked in blood, communities needing to change and remodel the entire masjid, and the hearts remained heavy. And the attack last week, it wasn't something new. Rather, it existed at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And it will continue to exist until the end of time. And this is the reality of the truth. This is the reality of Tawheed and monotheism. There will always be some form of opposition. And this reason, this Islamophobia, fear of the spreading of Islam, fear of the growth of the Muslims, this is the reason why we find the oppression that exists around the world. This is the reason why 3 million Muslims in China are being held and forced to eat pork, and forced to drink alcohol, and forced to shave their beards, and change their names, and their children are snatched from them, and placed in re-education centers, because of this very same concept. This is why the biggest refugee camp on the face of the earth, in Burma, with almost 1 million people in it who had to flee death and persecution to save their deen. This is why people lose their citizenship, and masajid are destroyed, and the scholars around the world are imprisoned, and. This fear of the spread of Islam around the world and the growth of Islam is what led this man to walk into a masjid on Jum'ah, the day that the Prophet Muhammad said about it, no better day in the week, the Eid of the week. And he shed the blood of those 50 or so people in the houses of Allah on that day. Can you imagine his situation? Can you imagine the darkness in his heart? Can you imagine the darkness of his day of judgment? Can you imagine his outcome when he meets Allah Azza wa Jal? But we have to always remember, we have to always be firm and remember that nothing that happens to us is outside of the will of Allah, is outside of the decree of Allah. Some of us, we get carried away. The emotions take over. Why is this happening? There's no good in this. This shouldn't have happened. And this is the mistake. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us, قُلْ لَن يُصِيبَنَا إِلَّا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَنَا. Say to them, O Muhammad, nothing will befall us except for that which Allah Azza wa Jal has already decreed. هُوَ مَوْلَانَا. He is our protector. He is our helper. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكِّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. So let the believers put their trust in Allah. So never allow yourself to lose hope. Never allow yourself to have that su'u al-dhann, those evil thoughts about Allah. Never allow yourself to think of those thoughts. And remember that Allah Azza wa Jal does not do anything that's purely evil. Shaykh bin Uthaymeen, he said, حَتَّى الشَّرُّ الَّذِي قَدَّرَهُ اللَّهُ لَابُدْ أَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ عَاقِبَةٌ حَمِيدًا. Even the apparent evil that Allah Azza wa Jal decrees, there must be, no doubt, there must be a good ending to it. It's just a matter of time until we see it. And he said it will be maybe shar for a small group, but it will be khair for many others. Look at the khair. In just 1 week that's passed by that we've seen, the Quran was recited in the New Zealand parliamentary meetings. The adhan was broadcasted on national TV and live radio. The khutbah last night was played and live streamed for everyone in New Zealand and Europe. Thousands of non-Muslims came and attended. The women in New Zealand all wore the hijab out of solidarity to remember the victims. There's khair in it. There will be khair. Whether we see it or not, whether we understand it or not, whether it makes sense to us, Allah Azza wa Jal does not do anything that does not have khair in it, that does not have wisdom in it. And we have to also remember that for Islam to spread and reach us today, the Muslims had to go through very similar occurrences and experiences like these. Abu Jahl was a terrorist. He would tie people up to the trees, men, women, children, torture them, assault them, and eventually kill them. That's what was going on at that time. They were unable to do anything but say, sabran. The Prophet Muhammad would walk by and say, sabran. Just have patience. فَإِنَّ مَوْعِدَكُمُ الْجَنَّةِ. Your destination is Jannah, just have patience. The believers became refugees. They had to escape their land. They had to seek refuge in another land. Those innocent Muslims that were killed there, their souls will be flying in Jannah. They'll be in green lanterns under the throne of Allah. The Prophet Muhammad said about them, the ones who die for the sake of Allah, their souls will be in lanterns. And they'll be allowed to fly through Jannah whenever and wherever they want. And then every time they return back, Allah Azza wa Jalla will ask them, is there anything you desire? Is there anything that you wish? And they'll say, oh Allah, we're here under your throne. We're flying through paradise. What more could we want? But Allah will continue asking them over and over until they say, yes, oh Allah. The only wish that we have is that we can be returned back to our bodies so that we can die for your sake over and over and over. Now compare that to the ones who Allah Azza wa Jalla says about them, وَهُمْ يَحْمِلُونَ أَوْزَارَهُمْ عَلَى ظُهُورِهِمْ. They'll be carrying all of the burden of each sin that they did on their backs. The sins will be talking to them and telling them, just like you used to ride us in the dunya to fulfill your desires, to oppress one another, to murder and steal and cheat and deceive, just like you used to ride us, we will ride you today until we lead you to the hellfire. And they too will want to be sent back, but for a different reason. وَلَوْ تَرَى إِذْ وُقِفُوا عَلَى النَّارِ. If only you could see them when they're standing by the fire, when they reach the fire, when their sins have led them to the fire. وَلَوْ تَرَى إِذْ وُقِفُوا عَلَى النَّارِ فَقَالُوا يَا لَيْتَنَا نُرَدْ. And they'll be saying, the only thought on their mind will be, if only we can be sent back. If only we can be sent back to believe, to do differently, to change our lives, to be from the good doers. And what we have to make sure that we don't do is resort to fear. Sisters contemplating taking off the hijab. Others saying we shouldn't go to the masajid. Maybe at night we shouldn't go. That's the last thing that we want to do. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after the Battle of Uhud, one of the biggest catastrophes in Islamic history, where some of the elite companions were killed, their bodies were mutilated. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was injured himself. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ heard that Abu Sufyan was gathering an army to come back and to finish off the Muslims. So he went to those very same companions who hadn't even recovered yet, who were still wounded, who were still mutilated, who were still burying their loved ones. They didn't cave in, they responded. They gathered an army bigger than what they had. And they went out to that place and camped out. And they lit 500 campfires there. When Quraysh saw that, they retreated. And Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions this in the Quran. الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. The ones that when the people said to them, everyone's gathering against you. Everyone's coming. They're all coming to get you. They're all gathering against you. What happened? زَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Their iman went up. Their iman increased. And they said, Hasbunallah. Allah is sufficient for us. And He is the best disposer of our affairs. And what does Allah Azza wa Jalla say? One ayah after that. إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانِ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ. That's only the shaitan who's trying to scare, who's trying to instill the fear in his supporters. فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah says, don't be scared of them, but fear me if you truly are believers. So we can't let these events change us and change our resolve and our determination and our strive and our resilience. We have to turn to Allah stronger. We have to respond with stronger faith, with more worship, with more da'wah. One of the sisters, and I'll end with this, who was interviewed. A news reporter came to interview her. She had lost her husband and her son. The one they said about her husband was the hero. They hailed the hero. The one who was trying to save others and attack the gunmen in the masjid. They came to interview her. And the news reporter was nearly crying. But the sister was smiling. She was happy. She was upbeat. The news reporter couldn't believe it. She said, "What is it? How do you remain like this?" She said, "My faith." "What else?" "Nothing else. Only my deen. I'm happy. My husband, my son, they died in the masjid in a way that we would dream. I'm happy. I feel pity for the murderer. His heart filled with anger. His heart filled with rage. His lack of peace in his heart. I feel bad for him. Don't feel bad for my husband and my son. We're happy. We're content. We're at peace because we have deen."